Hi, everyone. My name is Nazareth. I'm the program coordinator here at the Africa Center. If you guys are just visiting us for the first time, the Africa Center is a cultural institution focused on transforming narratives and the world's understanding of Africa, its diaspora, and people of African descent. We've been lucky enough to partner with MOFAD on this amazing exhibit in this space and also put on a series of programs, which this is one of our last. We're grateful that MOFAD has partnered with us, and we're excited for this program, and Sari from MOFAD will introduce tonight's events.
Thank you, Nazareth. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome. My name is Sari Kamen. I'm the Public Program Director at MOFAD. Like Nazareth said, we're the Museum of Food and Drink. We have an exhibition. It's right there. Did some of you get to see it before we started? Good. Well, we actually just announced today that we're extending the exhibition in the Africa Center through the end of July. So yay. You can come back. You can bring your friends. You can tell your friends. This is, however, our last program in this space. So I'm really glad you all could be here. It's been such a pleasure. It's been so joy-filled to be in this space and be in community with all of you and have so many incredible folks come out for the programs we've been doing here. And it is such a beautiful note to end on this evening. We're so grateful to have Nicole Taylor. She's right there. Author of Watermelon and Redbirds. And if you don't have her book yet, we have it for sale with our friends at BEM, our pop-up bookstore. So you can buy it after the program. Oh my God, the baby. So Nicole's going to be signing books. And so if you'll just take a beat, we're going to have a cocktail. We're going to have some hibiscus tea from our lovely friends from Soba Hibiscus. So you can grab some drinks at the end and then buy your book and then come back right here and Nicole will sign them. So you know Nicole, she's our featured author this evening. We're also so happy to have my friend Osayi Endolyn, a James Beard awarded food writer. She's working on her own book right now. She's co-author of the book The Rise that she wrote with Marcus Samuelson. We have that in the bookshop as well, just FYI. So that's about it. I want to thank all of you on Zoom, wherever you are watching from home, and thank all of you for being here, and we'll see you at the end.
Good evening. Hey, everyone here in the building, at home. It's great to be here with you.
I know. This is amazing. To be in conversation with a great friend and colleague, it makes it
Privilege.
super easy.
Yes. Well, we're going to get right into it. This book, congratulations. It's been quite a journey. Watermelon and Redbirds. A cookbook for Juneteenth and Black celebrations. Why don't we start with just level setting for everyone? What is Juneteenth?
June 19th, 1865 is the day that Major General Granger arrived on the island of Galveston and told more than 200,000 enslaved Black Texans that they were free. But get this, it was more than 2 years after President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. So Juneteenth, the word Juneteenth is a mashup of June 19th.
So you're originally from Athens, Georgia. You've spent over a decade here in New York City, lots of travel and experiences in between. But you're not from Texas. So how did you come to locate Juneteenth in your personal tradition? How did you come to find it as a locus point for your own celebrations?
Yeah, this chair is funny. I'm kind of short. I actually have been in New York for more than a decade. I moved here in 2008 from Atlanta. I went to school in Atlanta. I lived in Atlanta for 13 years. Atlanta is the place that I first heard the word Juneteenth. But I don't think I could have done what I just did before. It would like give the whole sentence and say what it was. I just knew that it was an emancipation celebration with origins in Texas. The first Juneteenth event I ever attended was in New York City. Yeah, it was in Collier Gore Park, a small little pocket park in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. And I write about it in the cookbook. There was a community-based organization doing their annual Juneteenth festival. And, you know, we've all seen festivals in New York. You know, you have the stage, there's an MC, there are kids performing, and maybe a marching band. But what I remember most about that celebration is there was this Black gentleman dressed like a cowboy in cowboy attire, and he had a pony, and there were kids taking pony rides around the park. And their faces were full of like joy, freedom, innocence. And I was like, wow, look at that. That was the symbol, or to me, an indication of how connected we are, Black people, to Texas. And at that moment, I knew that Juneteenth needed to be an annual celebration for me and my family and friends. So I started hosting Juneteenth parties and celebrations.
So you take this aha moment and you start putting it into the fabric of your life, which you're already kind of a consummate entertainer, in my opinion. Talk about how you started to bridge this tradition. What did that look like for you in the beginning? Did it feel like you had to kind of explain it, or is it just was something that you gravitated to immediately?
I mean, I know Black celebrations. and I say that with confidence because I'm always hosting a party. I'm always hosting a celebration with many elements that you find at traditional Juneteenth events. From my dorm room in Atlanta at Clark Atlanta University, to our apartments in Atlanta, to my house in Athens, to places in Brooklyn, I've gathered Black people around the table, and I've made my home a place where people can take a deep breath, they can have fabulous food and boozy or non-boozy drinks. And so me leaning into Juneteenth felt really easy. I will say this though, one of the things that I always try to do when I start a Juneteenth celebration is center why we're here. Before the music starts, you know, before I Let Go comes on, the people that get there on time, and I say that in quotation marks, on time, I try to start off like doing a prayer or a toast, a proper prayer or toast, not with the red cups, not with the blue cups, but with nice glassware to honor why we're here and to thank the ancestors, thank my family, thank God for me, for the privilege of me having the funds just to buy some extra food to host people. So that is probably the thing that makes my Juneteenth special, because I always try to do that in the very beginning.
So you're starting to talk about food and beverage, and I feel like this is a great point to have you pause and read from Watermelon and Redbirds. I want Nicole to read from the section that starts red drinks.
Thank you for passing this. Sorry here. Red drinks. At Juneteenth, the official beverage is the red drink. Red soda, red Kool-Aid, or red punch. The tradition of red drinks began mostly with the parts of two plants, the cola nut, a seed of the cola plant, and the hibiscus pod, the innermost pod of the roselle flower. West African culture came to the US with the transatlantic slave trade. And so the drinking tradition of seeds steeped in water became incised into Black people's DNA. I keep a dried cola nut on my altar to honor our connection to Benin, to Negril, to Sapelo, and to Galveston Islands year-round. In his book, Soul Food, The Surprising Story of an American Cuisine One Plate at a Time, food scholar and James Beard Award-winning Adrian Miller dedicates a section to red drinks. He writes, red drinks were plentiful in the plantation big house. Antebellum Southern cookbooks are replete with recipes for homemade cherry, raspberry, strawberry liqueurs, syrups, and vinegars, kept on hand to color a wide range of hard and soft drinks. The drink's color and aura is paramount. It's visually bold, calling attention to itself as it's to declare its own freedom from plain water or pale lemonade. At least one ruby beverage must be consumed at Juneteenth, on Juneteenth, excuse me. Whether it's a scarlet colored margarita or watermelon lemonade, red drinks are a sultry bolster in a pitcher. You pour a cup, the condensation hits your fingers and aids in throwing your hands in the air from side to side. DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince's Summertime is bouncing throughout the room and getting you up from your seat to hug the person you haven't laid eyes on in forever. Never putting your cup down. After a few sips, you can feel the spirit of a distant friend. Bright lipstick stains on another glass reminds you of hers.
Yes. I love that introduction to the recipes that follow in this cookbook, because just like so much of this book, Nicole, you so beautifully capture the spirit of where these traditions emerged from, the cultures that kind of singularly combine them in this crazy experiment that, you know, human beings have been processing the last few centuries. And then at the same time, you're still finding space to capture your 20s, your early childhood, your memories, and evolving these new traditions. I think that's a really powerful passage and kind of symbolic of what red drinks mean. So, you know, what kind of red drinks you drinking on Juneteenth, Nicole?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna make the watermelon ginger beer. I got back into making my own ginger beer. How many people here do their own ginger beer? Like have the ginger bug, the starter. Man, it's amazing to babysit that thing, right? It's like sourdough.
And just for anyone who may not realize, ginger beer, we're speaking of a non-alcoholic fermented beverage that you'll see a lot in the Caribbean, especially.
Yeah, and the recipe is in the book for the ginger beer. People cheat. I've already had a few people say, "Oh, I made the ginger beer." I'm like, "Wow, show me pictures of your starter." They're like, "No, I bought." I was like, "It's cool, it's cool, it's cool." But I definitely think I'm gonna make that for Juneteenth, because people who don't drink, they love it. You know, who don't drink alcohol, they love the drink. It has this ting, and then I use a fresh whole watermelon that I juice. If I have a juicer or access, I use my juicer, and you don't have to deal with, you know, straining all the pulp. If you're using a blender, and I talk about this in the recipe, you can just take cheesecloth and get all the pulp out of it. But sometimes I like a little of the pulp. I like a little of the texture in there. But I'll be making that for Juneteenth for sure.
Let's talk about some of the foods that you've got in this book and that you also bring into your menu on Juneteenth. One of the things that you say is, you know, you start kind of planning your menu well in advance, and you'll come up with many more dishes than you actually end up making that day, which seems to me pretty stressful myself. But like, you know, talk through some of the dishes that have come through all these years of celebrating Juneteenth and that, you know, that we'll see here in this book.
Well, I gotta ask you this. Did you know this about me, that I actually plan and write down all my meals every single week?
Yes.
So I have a stack, like stacks of pieces of paper. I don't do it in my phone. I don't do it on a spreadsheet, but every Sunday I write down, I mean, it's not exact, but 90%, you know, I'll write down, oh, I'm doing chicken breast with coriander and fonio and bok choy. So I have probably about 10 years of menu planning for weekday meals. And then I have another stack that's all celebrations, from Juneteenth to Memorial Day to Lynn Pitt's birthday. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Lynn.
I have a whole stack. So yeah, So when Juneteenth rolls around, even though I'm kind of on the road now, but I'm already thinking like, I need to start thinking about 3 days. I'll be in Athens. People are gonna be rolling up in my house. What am I making? So I start now, making that list.
What's on the list?
Definitely, we talked about the red drink. Barbecue, of course, cookout food, barbecue. I have this funny story in the book. I don't know if you got to that where I say, I basically micromanage my husband um, on the grill. I'm like, take the thermometer out. Please don't overcook this. But I'm gonna have the chicken burger for sure.
Victory chicken burger.
The Victory Chicken Burger, which is named after Mr. Gaines from A Different World. Vernon, his real name is Vernon. Oh my gosh, it's escaping me. But I reference A Different World in the head notes of the Victory Chicken Burger because when Hillman would win a football game, he would have these dollar victory burgers. So I wanted to make sure I pay homage to a show that I loved. It's probably responsible for me attending a HBCU. So yeah, Victory Chicken Burgers. And the chicken burgers are not dry, people. I approach them just like I approach meatballs, so or meatloaf. So that will be on the menu. You have to have burgers.
I want to go back just to kind of briefly, because you brought up A Different World, this fictional HBCU where you're seeing all the camaraderie, you're seeing so much Black culture expressed in a particular way at a particular time. You've been a chronicler of Black food culture for so much of your career, but I really want to hear like what was on the menu early in the days, these tiny celebrations in Atlanta. I see the razzle dazzle that you put on, you put it on us on the Instagram, we see, but like, how did it start?
I had a midnight brunch in my 20s, which is crazy when I think about it, because I remember a food colleague in Brooklyn starting a whole business called Midnight Brunch. And when I started writing this book, I remember having this very cheap waffle maker, and there were like 20 people at my house. And I was cranking out waffles at 11 o'clock at night and turkey bacon. That's when I was eating nothing but turkey bacon. And I was like, I remember having a pan, like sheet pans, and making nonstop turkey bacon, and we were playing Taboo. Remember Taboo? So this was at 11 o'clock at night. I wanted to, and I also would say this marks the rise of chicken and waffles. So that's why I did it. And I think I've written about this before for Extra Crispy, which was an online website dedicated to breakfast, like the origins of waffles. I like to think that waffles and the rise started in Atlanta. Some people will say Harlem at Wells, but that experience in that apartment in East Point was a very special food experience when I think about it.
And you're speaking specifically about like a new swell of interest in waffles for like brunch and like that kind of vibes, like late 90s.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think most people were probably standing in line at Gladys and Ron's Chicken and Waffles in Atlanta, which no longer exists. But I'm like, I'm not standing in line. I'm just going to do this at home and recreate this for my friends. So yeah, I was early on that, huh?
As you say in the subtitle of this book, we're talking not just about Juneteenth, which of course is right around the corner, but you're talking about Black celebrations. And you've already mentioned a little bit about like summer energy, summer vibes, knowing, being well-grounded in Black celebrations. But why was it important for you to, rooting this project in Juneteenth, why was it important for you to signify this broader appreciation for celebrations from a particularly African-American cultural perspective?
From block parties in Harlem to family reunions in Louisiana to HBCU graduations in Washington, D.C., there are things that you find at those parties or those celebrations that you can go all the way back to 1866 and you see. And one being the pride of people, the pride of Black people, and that is the way we dress. You know, there's a reverence to how we enter the room when we're attending a Black celebration. Some of the other things, other elements of Black celebrations that mirror Juneteenth would be the music. I mean, people laugh before when I said before I let go, but you know exactly what I mean when I say that, right? Or for my generation, when they play Summertime by DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, Will Smith, people stand up and you know that the electric slide is going to happen. Now is the wobble. I can't remember all this stuff, but there are things you're always going to see. And I'm talking about culture now, but then when we move to food, you see the same things. You're going to see a pound cake. You're going to see a layer cake. You're going to see a layer cake or dessert that's going to be a showstopper. I can't remember your question. What did you ask me? You asked me something about Black celebrations and how they all connected.
Yeah, and why it was important for you to specifically call out, to root it in Juneteenth, but to call out this broader appreciation. I think what I'm speaking to is recognizing, as you said, those specific moments, but I think you're saying something bigger about what it means to be Black, to be rooted in this country from this particular narrative of freedom and liberation, right? So I think I'm like leading you on a little bit, but like,
Yeah,
I feel
I know exactly what you're saying. Or listen, the last 2 years have been hell for Black people, for all Americans. And when I think about the summer of 2020 and the murder of George Floyd and the uprisings, that was a moment when I knew for certain that not only was this cookbook something that I was doing for the culture, but it was something that we needed. It was important for me to center Black joy in a very specific way, Black joy around the dinner table. What I find and what so many people find about the Black experience in America is that we're at the same time celebrating, but at the same time crying inside. You know, I know that, I've seen that. I know what it feels like to attend a homegoing celebration for a loved one. And the repast, after the repast, everyone is smiling and hugging, and it feels like a family reunion. And I don't believe that experience, that dichotomy has been recorded enough. And so it was important for me to say that in the head notes, to show the joy and to show the sorrow as well, and show the pain.
But there really is so much effusive joy in this book, and it's like, it's not like you're reaching for it, like it's always there. I'm just thinking right now, one of my favorite spreads is one of Nicole's son, Garvey, holding a corn dog. And he's grown up so much since that photograph was taken, which kind of tells you how much time it takes to make a book. But what are some of those festive moments that you kind of think about in the book, people can kind of locate themselves with the recipes?
One of my favorite chapters in Watermelon and Redbirds is the Festivals and Fairs chapter. And that's the chapter that Osayi is referring to when Garvey is holding the corn dog. And that chapter, I intended that chapter to be, of course, about Juneteenth, but taking us back to all people, all Americans, back to summer times when you went to Six Flags, or you went to a state fair or an outdoor festival, and you stood in that long ass line to get a funnel cake, and you could smell the golden buttery batter and the sprinkled powdered sugar on top, and you would get the red strawberry topping or the apple topping. I like mine without topping, but I'll take a little fruit as well. I wanted that chapter to invoke happy memories of summer in America. So you see a lot of Americana food there, but you also see foods, festival and foods that are tied to Mexican culture, that are tied to Texas culture. And I did that on purpose, for sure.
So you spent much of the process writing this book back in your hometown of Athens, Georgia, just an hour and change north of Atlanta. And I would love to hear you talk a little bit about your upbringing in Athens and kind of what what the traditions or what the cultures was like. Just talk to us about who you were
want me to do
around.
Athens, huh?
I want you to give us a little Athens.
So Athens, Georgia is a small college town. It is the home of the University of Georgia. I am a fourth generation Athenian. During the middle of the pandemic, my husband, I can't say he came home. Okay, he came into the other room, was like, hey, we should move to Athens. I'm like, what? He was like, we should just take a break for like 3 months, buy a house in Athens, and so we can have more space and we can get some work done. We're closing, we're too tight in this apartment. And it took me a day, and I'm like, okay, I'll only be in this place that I said I would never return to for 3 months. It's been 2 years plus. So we've split our time now between Athens and New York City. But Athens, growing up, I thought I was like not a country girl. It's not until I went to college, I was like, oh, I'm real country. I grew up in a small town. I didn't realize that until I was, a 19-year-old college student. My mother graduated from high school in 1972. She was the second integrated class in my hometown. She had big dreams, but she ended up working for more than 40 years at the chicken poultry and part-time at fast food restaurants. I remember in college, literally, she would send me her part-time job paycheck and just sign it over to me. When I was in college. So my family, I come from a line of hardworking blue collar folks who saw something in me and determined for me to have a better life. I choke up.
I was like, I can't believe she's gotten this far. She hasn't started crying yet.
I choke up thinking about it. And I will say, I credit the pandemic, because before I was running from that. I was running from that story. I hadn't fully embraced that story, but going back home grounded me in a way that I didn't expect. So you see a lot of that in this cookbook.
So talk about that grounding. So the red birds that you are speaking about in the title is very much located in your upbringing in Athens and connected to your mother, who I love. Talk to us about that.
You met my mom. She's a trip. My mom she is very old school. She is a person who she works. She understands work, but she also, I've seen my mother relax and celebrate. I picked up cues on how to make people feel good and welcoming from her. She also implanted a lot of stories in me that she doesn't even realize. And the story of the red bird, I got it from her. Growing up, she would tell me, look outside, there's a red bird. Blow the red bird a kiss. And I would say, why? She was like, it's somebody in the family coming back to say hello. It's good luck. It's the ancestors. I didn't even remember that story until I was on MTA and trying to figure out if I could write this book. Was I the person to write this book? And that story came back to me, and I was like, this needs to be the title of this Juneteenth cookbook. And I will say, many people were like, oh no, it sounds like a novel. Maybe you should go with another title. But I'm like, no, this title, Watermelon and Red Birds, is symbolic of the past, the present, and the future. It says everything about Black America and America today.
And we should talk about watermelon part as well, because it's the more familiar metaphor. Well, it's not really a metaphor, it's a clear symbol, figurative, literally. But it's also one that can spark a lot of discomfort for folks coming from an African-American heritage. Do you want to talk about kind of claiming that and what that means to you?
Well, first off, I think last year for the New York Times, I wrote about the origins of watermelon. Watermelon is a native African fruit. Let's start with that. Let's set that off. For me, I have fond memories of watermelon. I can't think of a summer where I have not bought a watermelon, or I don't remember a watermelon being bought and watching that watermelon all day long, waiting for someone to bust that thing open, and getting your piece of newspaper and them making the kids go outside, so the juice would not run all in the house. And you knew that when that watermelon was cut, that it wasn't just going to be for one person. Like, you call somebody else over to the house to say, we're cutting the watermelon up now. Is it sweet? Is it sweet? And I would be looking at the adults crazy because they would sprinkle a little salt on it. And this is when watermelon had black seeds, right? So then you would spit the seeds in the yard and do all kind of contests. So when I think of watermelon, I think of the summertime. I think of that. But it's not lost on me that for many Black people, when they think about watermelon, images of exaggerated lips and us eating watermelons, images that were put out in the US by companies and product manufacturers and other companies in Europe and artists, people go back to that. I also have a theory. I don't know if I've told you this theory. I think I've told you this theory. I think that young people in their 20s, they've never seen a full freaking watermelon. I think they're used to seeing watermelon already cubed up in a plastic container. So when, they see, or certain young folks see images of Black people with a moon-shaped watermelon, it throws them. That's my theory. There's been a lot of conversation on the internet around watermelon, particularly last year. But I'm reclaiming it. I'm leaning into the happy memories. And I think that I know that a lot of Black people that I talk to, no matter where you're from, even non-Black Americans, they have happy memories of eating watermelon in the summertime, period, point blank, the end.
Yeah, I think for me too, I mean, I'm from California and I moved to Atlanta after I finished college, but I was very aware of those images, I think because of the way we are asked to like appreciate and learn history and see some of those things. And it wasn't until much later though I understood the context, because you're like, how did these images just start popping up, right? Like, and for people who may not be aware, that came during a time when that post-Civil War Reconstruction era, where you have a lot of representation and a lot of changes happening with African-American people asserting themselves and getting elected to Congress and, buying property and doing all these things. And that's when you start seeing like, these essays and these, vitriolic op-eds and the illustrations that are trying to galvanize more support around, okay, wait. So we ended this thing, but we didn't mean for like all this like representation to start happening. So there are multiple levels of the systemic approach to subjugating the whole culture.
And during that time period, another thing that you start to see is you start seeing Black foods being used against us, or foods that we love, like fried chicken, watermelon. They started to be flipped, and you started seeing chicken laws. Like, they had these outrageous laws if someone went out and stole a chicken to bring home to cook. It's insanity. So during that time period, food was used against us, and certain foods or stereotypes of foods became like a thing. And that is the time period, ironically, that it started. I'm not a historian, but
neither of us are, but we've leaned a lot on some of the historians that you reference here, and I love that you take care to call out so many people who are folks that you buy food from today, folks that you've had parties with in the past. Every headnote here or every section, there's a reference to the people who've been so pivotal in shaping Nicole's culinary life. I'm curious about what well, selfishly, I would love to hear you talk about the Miss Evers story because even though this is a head note that I am mentioned in the book, I think it speaks to the regionality of African-American cuisine. And maybe before I ask you specifically about that note, we should say, what you're doing in this project is not really trying to identify or pull from any one tradition, right? Like you're calling from, you have a dukkha spice here, North African blend. You've got all kinds of grains and flavor profiles. I'm getting ahead of myself. Why don't you tell me a little bit about like the framing for like kind of that worldly approach in the food of the book and how you're evolving a tradition just as much as you are embracing it.
So I'm gonna go back to your first question because that was 3 questions.
I
in
know,
there.
I'm sorry.
It's
I
all
just got
good.
excited.
It was super important for me in this book to literally call people's names, say their names, like fully, and not erase them. Because when you open up cookbooks or you open up books about Black folks, you want to be able to have cultural cues, or you want to be able to go down a deeper rabbit hole, in my opinion. Of course, my book is a cookbook. It's not a history book. I'm not a historian. I'm not a food scholar, but I wanted to make sure that people knew who State Representative Al Edwards. I wanted people to know his name. He's gone on, but he was called Mr. Juneteenth. And in 1979, he lobbied in the state of Texas to make Juneteenth a state holiday. And not having his name in the book and just having Opal Lee is a disservice to Americans. Making sure that I say Marguerite Hannah's name, who is mentioned in the Afro Egg Cream head note, was super important. She's born and raised in Galveston, Texas. Someone introduced me to her and was like, you need to talk to her. And we talked about her Juneteenth celebrations growing up. She never mentioned her family ties to Galveston. And it wasn't until I went to Galveston and started reading all of these books that her grandfather was once listed in Ebony magazine as the most wealthiest man in the country. He was a prominent businessman in Galveston, but not saying her name literally erases Mr. T.D. Armstrong. So yeah, I was like, you got to put names in this book. I don't care who they are, from big people to small people to farmers. I demanded that. So that kind of answers your first question. I knew that was super important for me to do.
And in said naming, you're also speaking to, ingredients and things that, Omar Tate speaks to this, and actually he has a poem that opens the book, a really beautiful poem, The Chef in Philadelphia. But he talks about when you're claiming Black food as, tangible ingredients, as a discourse, there's, yes, these narratives that are, full of autonomy and sovereignty and, planting things in the ground. And then there's also the part that comes from the systemic circumstances of how this country was founded and the inequities that exist. And yet those manufactured ingredients and those products are still part of a Black food narrative. And so he grapples with this in his cooking and his representation in unique ways. But I think coming back to the Miss Evers and just also the regionality of Black food and how specific certain things are to spaces. Can you talk about what Miss Evers is and kind of your surprise at my lack of knowledge about it?
Yeah. So Mick Evers, because I mean, my mom, we have a deep Southern accent, so it just sounds like Mick Evers.
Well, yeah, I'm calling it wrong because that's the name I heard. Sorry.
So it's Miss Evers, and it's a red, bright red, and the red comes from Red 40 sausage link, hot link. That's a regional hot link and sausage that I grew up eating in Athens and seeing, and you still can find them in the local grocery stores in Athens. And it's so funny because one of my chef friends, his name is Chef Mike Sheets. He's worked in fine dining in Atlanta, and he's from Athens. And I literally mentioned Miss Evers. He went on this whole tirade, just like my mom went on this whole thing with Osayi explaining the sausage. And he was like, oh, they're the best sausages to boil and put mustard on them. You can't put them on the grill. You need to boil them. And it was a thing. And when I was writing this book, I realized that manufactured sausages and hot links in the American South are such a thing. I mean, when you go to Texas, someone can write I'm waiting on the Juneteenth cookbook that is solely dedicated to hot links. It's a thing. I'm seeing my friend in the back nodding because she's from Louisiana, and I know that sausages and homemade sausages are a big thing, and it's a regional thing. So there's a sidebar in the book because Osayi was like, what are you talking about, Miss Evers? She's like, I don't know that sausage, but she knew and understood how regional sausages are. So I don't care where
No, I thought it was a person because her mother's drawl is so she, and I didn't know what you had a spread up. Nicole always has a spread. It's hard for me to remember when I'm at Nicole's house because I was like, was it a holiday? And it was like, no, it was just Tuesday morning and she got up early. Like, it's nuts. But your mother had come over and she had started talking about something, I think, because you had referenced like not having a sausage or something the next day on the grill. And it wasn't going to be part of the menu. Anyway, I kept going, who is Miss Evers? And like, why is she like not around or, and
I put it in the book. I put that whole entire story in that scenario in the book.
I mean, and I can't speak for every Black Californian, but that wasn't something that I ever saw or heard about, or even having family from Mississippi and Louisiana that were back and forth over the years. I had never heard about that brand.
And what happened during the Great Migrations, one of the reasons why you see Juneteenth in Harlem, why you see Juneteenth in Seattle and LA, Texans left, or people who had roots in Texas, they left during the Great Migrations and went to bigger cities or went somewhere else, and they took their traditions with them. But you can't find your regional sausages, so you make do, or you do it another way, or you try to figure out a way to recreate the foods of your Juneteenth or your celebration. So the sausages may just kind of fall off the menu, but your grandmother's from Mississippi, right? I'm sure there's something that never dropped off the menu. Yeah, but the sausage, that's a very specific thing. The hot links, which is totally connected to Juneteenth.
All right, so switching gears a little bit, inherent in the idea of celebrating, and we've kind of referenced this a little bit, you have to have a place where you can gather. And you have a recipe in the book called the Maroon Margarita. Can you talk about what that is inspired by and what you've been up to back in Athens?
So shout out to my husband, Adrian Franks. What's up, Adrian? That recipe, actually, Adrian came up with that recipe a little and I tweaked it, but not the name. So the Maroon Margarita in the book is a strawberry margarita mix, and I add coconut to it. There are fresh strawberries and lime juice, and then in the book I suggest that you mix it with tequila. You can switch it up with mezcal, and I even did this awesome box that a few people got at the launch of the book. And you can use tonic if you don't drink. You can mix it with tonic so you can make it non-alcoholic. But getting back to the title, the Maroon Margarita. So we named our house, this house that I was telling you guys about that we bought sight unseen in the middle of the pandemic. We gave the house a name, and it is called the Maroon House. And that name is to honor and celebrate enslaved people who decided, oh, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm leaving the plantation. And not only am I leaving the plantation, I'm going to build my own community deep in the woods. And I am going to make my own food. I am going to build my own house. And so in the Everglades, or the Great Dismal Swamp that's in Virginia, you find what scholars and people call maroons. And they are folks who left the plantations or life as an enslaved person and created their own communities. It's all throughout the Caribbean as well, and they're
Absolutely.
called Maroon. So our house is a very intentional place for us to relax and retreat. It is a place where the wallpaper is designed by a Black artist. Our light fixtures made and designed by a Black couple in Florida that has a company dedicated to light fixtures. So we've been very intentional about creating this space for rest, relaxation, and celebration. So this drink, this cocktail, is an ode to this place that we built.
Mm. And yeah, I mean, anywhere, speaking to the geographical areas that you touched on, I think it's just important to reiterate, anywhere there was enslavement, there were people rebelling and self-emancipating and creating their own communities. And I mean, it's just incredible when you think about it. Like we have jerk because of Maroons in Jamaica. I mean, there's just so many, it's really incredible. Yeah. I think we should turn it over to questions. If
This
there are
went fast.
questions. It did go fast. It did. Y'all ready for questions online here in the house? Maybe.
Thank you
see.
so much.
Thank
It's,
you.
It's been a
Thank you for having
whirlwind.
me.
This is like event number 2,000 million gazillion.
Okay, so a couple things. We have a mic in the house. Yeah.
We
So
do have one question that's virtual. Do you mind if I just start with
oh,
that
sure.
one?
We start with the virtual
Oh,
one. I saw two
okay.
hands. So hold your question.
I think I'm curious to know how she honors the ancestors with food on a more daily basis, not just on Juneteenth.
Great question. And you can find the answer in, I'm gonna give you the answer, but in the Everyday Juneteenth chapter, I have a chapter literally called Everyday Juneteenth. I have a sidebar called, and it's titled Carpe Diem, which is seize the day. And I literally list out things that I do to center myself and to honor the ancestors. And one of those things is going outside and being with nature and taking care of my plants and pausing. And I also mentioned in that sidebar, seize the day, I meditate every morning, and I do it in a non-traditional way. And people who know me know that for almost 4 years, I listen to an hour of Alice Coltrane every single morning. Every morning. And it's a way of honoring the ancestors, you know, it's a way of saying thank you for the life, thank you for being. But yeah, in the back of the cookbook, literally, I list out what I do every day to center myself and to bring the spirit of Juneteenth into
We're just tacking on to that because I don't think folks realize like your meditations are kind of like moving meditations. And so what are you doing when you're like, what's the vibe and the energy? Just kind of just give us some Alice
Yeah.
Coltrane like energy right now.
So on a good day, when I am really, really in tune with centering myself and being joyful, I'm gonna burn an incense like lemongrass, rope incense, or Palo Santo. I'm gonna be at my altar. I put names at my altar. I'm gonna look at those names. I'm gonna think about friends that I've texted with and they're, you know, dealing with health stuff. And I say, I'm gonna keep you in my thoughts. I don't just say it. I have an index card and I put their names there. But when I can tell when I'm off balance because I haven't been in my altar in days, and the names are like really old, you know, and I need to remove them or I need to text them and see what's going on. So yeah, and food plays into that because I will say this, when I'm most happy, I'm in the kitchen and I'm cooking for other people. When I'm down, the kitchen is dirty, the dishes are piled up, like it's crazy. But I know that I am top notch and ready to seize the day when I have made myself a smoothie. I have my water with vitamin D drops in it. And I've shopped and my list, you know, that list I told you about, I've crossed off things on that list, on my food list. So yeah,
Okay, so the first hand I saw a gentleman in the hat here. Just wait for the mic.
that was a
please.
long response, but sorry.
Yeah, I think this sort of aligns with what you were all just talking about, but for you, Nicole, what's your favorite comforty thing to make for yourself to nourish yourself?
French fries. This is my third cookbook. I don't know if people realize that. My first cookbook, the Up South cookbook, I love potatoes, so I have a potato and beet recipe in that. I developed the recipes for the last OG cookbook, which is a cookbook inspired by Tracy Morgan's TV series, The Last OG. And so I have French fries in that. And in this cookbook, in the festivals and fairs chapter, I have wavy fries with a lemon pepper seasoning and a dip. So yeah, that is my, what do you call that? Last meal or last whatever.
Yes.
Whatever.
That's what, yes. Okay. Do you have this?
Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
I have two questions for you. So what's your favorite meal of the day? And also, how long did it take you to put your cookbook together?
Whew. So the first one is easy. I love breakfast. I'm a breakfast person. I love breakfast. I love brunch. I should do a breakfast and brunch cookbook, but I hear that they don't sell. But yes, I love a hearty breakfast with lots of fruit. And if it's the weekend, I'll do grits and, saute a bunch of vegetables that are in the bottom of my bin that I need to get rid of. I do waffles a lot and pancakes. I love having great sausage and bacon on the weekends. But yeah, breakfast for certain is my favorite. And to answer your question about how long, wow. And I want Osayi to chime in here because she's written a few cookbooks. Typically, it takes about 2 or 3 years to write a cookbook. I wrote this book in 16 months. Yeah. I basically worked nonstop from the summer of 2020 until I turned this book in and edits. We were working all the way up to February. This book went to the printer in March and it's out in the world now. So no, I've been working. You typically have more time to write a cookbook, but yeah, I got it done.
And that was when you were, under contract, on deadline, and sprinting toward the finish line. But really, the work on this book came long before you signed with Simon and Schuster. So tell me, really, how long did it take?
I mean, listen, this book has been in me for a long time. It was, I wouldn't use the word easy, but I was able to go back to those notes I told you about, right? And think about what should be in the book. I also have had so many experiences around celebrating and hosting people that I just needed to be in a space and not doing a lot and being back in my hometown and not having all of the hustle and bustle of New York City helped me to recall those things. So that made it easier to write the book. Because when you're starting a book from scratch about something you know nothing about, I don't think a person would have been able to do this in 16 or 18 months. So yes, this book has been in me for quite some time, I would say.
Hi, just wanted to say thank you both for sharing all your stories and your memories. My question is about watermelon, and it goes back to you, Nicole, how you mentioned your early experiences with watermelon cookouts, spinning the watermelon seeds. And I was curious, what is your first memory of yellow watermelons?
Oh my
Sorry it took me so
gosh.
long to get to the question, but I had to put some respect on you both because this is amazing, and I'm really grateful for your conversation.
Thank you for coming and supporting.
course.
Yellow watermelons. Whoa. Did you see my eyes go like this?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. It was like, I don't know. You didn't see them. It's a rarity. It's still a rarity to see a yellow meat watermelon, right? I remember they didn't give kids the yellow meat watermelon. We couldn't get that. That was for the adults. They saved that for, it was crazy. And then I'll be like, oh my gosh, please, can I have one little piece? But it was a rarity. But I will tell you, down south, I see them more. I don't really see them in New York, but if I'm driving on a highway that's not near Athens, a small town, someone will be in a farm stand and they have yellow meat watermelon, and I'm like, oh, I have to get that. But my memory of yellow meat watermelon, and that's how I described it or remember saying it growing up, that kids didn't get it. It was you had to have the red one.
And it's about time now. I think I've already seen the watermelon trucks up from the south here uptown. So
Yeah,
that's like,
I lived in Bed-Stuy for about 11 years, and on Atlantic Avenue between East New York and Bedford-Stuyvesant, you can always find the Watermelon Man. I think there's one here in Harlem as well, and both of them have black seeded watermelons. There's a guy in Flatbush as well, who like has a Cash App and everything. The other people want cash. He has a Cash App. You can like text him. Yeah, and they come up around this time, and yeah,
I've seen, I was dumb. I was dumb. I didn't pull over at that time, but I should have. Yeah.
and if you're paying attention now, the watermelons that you see in your grocery store are probably from Texas or Florida, because it's hot there. So that's what you tend to get first, are the Texas watermelons.
All right, we had a couple more questions. Yes, put me back. Is that
That's Lynn.
Oh, hey, Lynn.
Hey, can you just, you know what I noticed about this cookbook, and I think of your previous books as well, is that I feel like you were the queen of putting a twist on the tradition. And I wonder like what your approach was specifically for this book, because Juneteenth is such a deep-seated celebration in so many places, right? And the foods associated with people have such really powerful and proprietary ideas about what that food should be and what it should look like, And so I'm just wondering like your thought process when it comes to riffing on the tradition.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I thought about that. That's one of the first things I started with, and how I approach the recipes. So I wanted to make sure that every single recipe is rooted in the Black American table or the African American table. So you see sweet potatoes in my cookbook, but you don't see them in a sweet potato pie. You see it in a sweet potato spritz. And that is a sweet potato simple syrup with similar spices that someone would put in a sweet potato pie at Thanksgiving. Instead of doing stewed down collard greens in this cookbook, I did a collard green pesto with fonio, or if you can't find fonio or you don't have access to it, you can use couscous. But that was my way of centering the African American table. And so it's throughout the cookbook that I do that. Another thing that I did, and when I did that, I referenced other cookbooks. I have a huge Black cookbook collection. So, I came up with ideas. Some things were an accident. To be honest with you, the sweet potato simple syrup, I didn't intentionally have that in the book. I actually had some leftover sweet potato syrup because I make it every winter. And when I started testing it, I was like, can I use this for something? What can I use this simple syrup for? And I had Cappelletti, which is a Amaro, a red Amaro, very similar to Aperol and Campari, but in my opinion, it's better. It's a better Amaro.
An aperitif.
Aperitif. So the sweet potato spritz has sweet potato syrup, it has Cappelletti, it has vodka, a slice of orange, which is a nod to Black culture, but also a nod to aperitivo culture in Italy.
And also, I think just very naturally reflective of how you entertain and how you serve yourself. I mean, to that point that Lynn makes about, where you choose to pivot in a recipe, I think it's just very expressive of your natural curiosity and also kind of claiming ingredients that may not be credited as part of the Black American pantry, but, to that regional point we talked about earlier, perhaps have been for quite some time.
And another crazy thing I did, I had a spreadsheet of fruits and vegetables that are bountiful in the summertime. I actually went on like a USDA to look at like a Victory Garden, US Victory Gardens. That was a starting point. I wanted to look at what were people growing in Victory Gardens in the 1940s and 50s. And so peaches, collards. I wanted to make sure that every fruit and vegetable that you think about in the summertime is represented in this book in some way. One of the only red fruits that did not make foods that did not make it in the book were beets. Because I'm like, beets in the summertime. I think people like pickled beets in the summertime, but I feel like it's more of a winter fall thing. Wouldn't you agree? Okay, so yeah, that didn't make it.
Abdul.
Hi, I'm Abdul again. And thank you so much. As the gentleman said, this is amazing to be here. I feel privileged. I noticed you speak a lot about beverages. I'm kind of into those things. It seems that you like to mix it up a lot at home. Where does that passion come from, and what sparked that? You know, the spritz, and oftentimes, so this isn't common language for me.
Yeah.
Speaking to people, you know, usually food is the forefront. But yeah, where did that come from? What sparked
I
that?
have 2 bars in Athens.
Well, there it is.
She means in the Maroon house.
In the
there are two
Maroon house,
bars.
yes. There are 2 bars. And I should say this. I'm a lightweight. Let me start with that. I can only really like have 2 drinks, but I like making drinks for people and seeing people unwind, you know, and not get drunk or anything, but just seeing people relax. So yeah, it's a curiosity. And I will say the curiosity too is about like trying different spirits. In the front part of the book, I have a whole entire section dedicated to Black owned products. And I mentioned some of my favorite Black owned spirits in that section. So I think the cocktails and playing with cocktails is about me being creative in the kitchen. And in my opinion, you don't need a lot of things to make cocktails, right? Or to play around with simple syrups. And I buy a lot from the farmer's market, and I'll have like leftover mint or leftover fill in the blank. So I'm always figuring out like, okay, I'm not gonna cook this again. Can I turn this into a simple syrup, or can I turn this into a shrub? How can I use this in a cocktail? How can I make a stock out of this? So the cocktails, Abdul, totally a curiosity thing.
Wow. Okay. So I just want to say to close this out, I think, Nicole, you were the perfect person to write this book.
Thank you.
I hope all of you give yourself an opportunity to familiarize yourself with her words. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you
you to
guys.
MOFAD for having us. Thank you to the Africa Center.
Oh, and yeah, the quilt. Oh my gosh, this is my second time being here. I'm literally sitting it right in front of my square. If I look diagonal, it's right there.
So I'm actually so glad you said that, Nicole. First of all, thank you to both of you,
Thank you.
and congratulations, and thank you for letting us be a part of this joyous evening and celebration of your beautiful book, and thank you, Osayi. So I'm so glad you mentioned that, because Nicole is one of the exhibition advisors, and Osayi actually wrote the stories behind all the different folks that you see on the quilt. And I mean, I think I'm feeling a little emotional because it's our last program in this space, but we have Adrian here, Nicole's husband, who actually did the design, all the graphics of all the beautiful faces and images that you see. So that's so special that all of you are here. And I'm going to shout out Clancy Miller right there, who's on the quilt. Not to embarrass you, but it's just so beautiful to be in the room with all of you. So thank you again for both of you for being here tonight. And Abdul, since you're here, why don't you tell us, Abdul is being very, very modest about his interest in cocktails. He's the cocktail director next door at Teranga, which is an amazing restaurant serving West African food. Why don't you tell us about the cocktail that you made for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So to be in theme and cognizant with the whole night, I made a cocktail infused with mezcal infused with watermelon. for like 2 or 3 days. I just kind of strained it off, and I've mixed that with BSAP to bring it back home to Teranga and West Africa. If you aren't familiar with BSAP, this is a hibiscus variation, which there are many, many across the world, but what a lot of people don't know is there are some at home in Africa. Also with a little sweet vermouth to help round it off. Hopefully I did as good as Nicole does at our home bar, but yeah, mezcal, infused watermelon, BSAP, and vermouth. I think it's kind of tasty, so enjoy.
And we also have a non-alcoholic option from Firdas. Can I call you out? So we got an amazing donation of hibiscus tea tonight that we have.
Thank you. So yeah, so I also donated some of my hibiscus products. So we have 3 flavors. We have a classic, which is called Irresistible, and then we have pineapple. All of our bases are all hibiscus, and we also have a ginger. So they're non-alcoholic for those who like that version, and we're gonna have it served right next to our cocktail connoisseurs version.
So thanks, everyone. Just as a reminder, the books can be purchased. Any book from the store can be purchased, but especially Nicole's book back there. And then once you're ready, grab a drink. We'll have a line right here, and Nicole will be here signing. So thank you so much again for being here tonight.